Introducing Wonderlight, a groundbreaking new Catholic video game from Loyola Press. Wonderlight gives kids a new way to engage with and talk about their faith, putting their lessons of discipleship into practice in a safe and fun way. Kids role-play discipleship in an epic adventure with a customized character that lets children imagine themselves in the world of the game. Learn more at wonderlightgame.com.
OSV is more than what most people think it is. We serve somewhere between 8 and 10 million people with everything from pamphlets to periodicals to books to fundraising, now church management software, religious education, and the list goes on. We're always looking for new ways to serve the church so that individuals, families, and parishes can draw closer to Christ.
Welcome to this NCA 2021 live session entitled Utilizing the NSBECS as a Framework to Advance the Mission of Catholic Schools and Support Continuous School Improvement. Our presenter is Jeannie Ray Timoni, EDD of the Archdiocese of Portland. We invite you to actively engage with this presentation using the messaging and questions functions in the event platform. At the conclusion of the session, you will have the opportunity to complete a post-session evaluation and provide feedback that will also track your participation in our sessions. If you run into any problems, we invite you to refresh your page or use the help section on the event platform. Dr. Ray Timoni, thank you for being with us here at NCA 2021, and we turn it over to you to begin.
Happy Easter, and thank you so very much for having me today. I'm going to share my screen so that you can follow along with me. Make sure I get myself set up here. Okay. I know that I will have some facilitators forwarding questions for me. So as I go along, if you have a question, feel free to put it, to submit it, and they will get it to me. It might be a little delay, but I will try to answer as many questions as I can. As I said, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the National Standards and Benchmarks for Effective Catholic Secondary and Elementary Schools, and how we can use those as a framework to advance the mission of our Catholic schools and to support that continuous improvement. I'm just hoping, I know this is a short amount of time, but I would hope that the participants will know that the defining characteristics of Catholic schools are foundational to Catholic education in the NSBECS, that you will understand that there are 4 domains in the NSBECS and how you can utilize them as a framework for planning for future vitality and viability of your schools. We may not have as much time as I hoped possible to engage together on real world challenges, but we'll try to get to that through the question box. And then hopefully you may be inspired by the idea of integrating mission and vision and planning, and maybe accreditation for your future growth of your schools and institutions. So the NSBECS are founded on the 9 defining characteristics of Catholic schools. I think it's really important for us to not just jump to the 4 domains, but to remember that we have a long tradition in Catholic education here in the United States and actually in the world, but that as the folks put together the NSBECS, they did rely on all the Catholic documents that were available in describing and defining what those characteristics would be. And first and foremost, we are centered in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the most compelling example of the realization of full human potential. We want to make sure that for our students, we are going to foster a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and communal witness to the gospel message, and love of God and neighbor, and service to the world, especially the poor and marginalized. So that's number 1. The second defining characteristic is that we are contributing to the evangelizing mission of the church. Catholic schools participate directly and in a privileged way to the evangelizing mission of the church. It's important for us to remember that we're not just private schools, but that we are Catholic schools. The environment in Catholic schools should express the signs of Catholic culture physically and visibly. And it's really important that we remember this. Again, we're not private schools, we're Catholic schools. We are also distinguished by excellence. This is written in our church documents. It's in history and practices. It's supported by canon law. We established that first and foremost, the Catholic schools is characterized by excellence. We know in canon law that it says that we should be as good as, if not better than, schools that are local to us. We want to implement ongoing processes and structures and gather evidence to ensure excellence in every aspect of our programs, our life, and our activities. So these are characteristics of every Catholic school. We're committed to educate the whole child. I think it's important, we talk about this a lot, but we need to know that it really is in our foundational documents that we really look to the whole child. We are rooted in that conviction that human beings have a transcendent destiny, and that education for the whole person must form them spiritually, intellectually, physically, psychologically, socially, morally, aesthetically, and religiously. We need to look at each child in all aspects. And we want to develop and implement academic, co-curricular, faith-filled, and service ministry programs to educate the whole child in all these dimensions. And I just find personally that it's really compelling that this is actually written in our Catholic documents, and that is foundational. It has been since the beginning of Catholic education. We are also steeped in a Catholic worldview. I think there is a concurrent session right now specifically related to that Catholic worldview and how it permeates all of curriculum. So this is definitely one of the 9 defining characteristics that is integral to the formation of the human person. So our curriculum instruction, it should foster that desire to seek wisdom and truth, the preference for social justice, the discipline to become learners and leaders, the capacity to recognize ethical, moral grounding for behavior. It really is important that we have a responsibility to transform with gospel values, and that should be throughout everything that we do. We are sustained by gospel witness. It's really important, especially nowadays. Sometimes it's hard to find teachers that are practicing Catholics, but it's important that we try to recruit as best we can teachers who are practicing Catholics and leaders who are practicing Catholics. And if not, both those who are practicing Catholics and those who are not, who can understand and accept the teachings of the Catholic Church and the moral demands of the gospel. It's really important because it does add to the community and communion of our schools. We want to make sure that those who we hire can contribute to the achievement of the school and their Catholic identity, the goals, including their participation in the school's commitment to social justice and evangelization. You'll notice that on all of these slides that I'm showing you, I've tried to show you what documents that they've come from, and I am going to give you a list of those documents in one of these slides, and I think that my PowerPoint will be available later. But you can see the richness of all the defining Catholic documents and how it supports us. We are also shaped by communion and community. We are a communal people. We want to make sure that we have an educational community of persons in genuine community of faith. We want to promote genuine trust and collaboration among our teachers and parents as the primary educators of our children. The members to foster appreciation of different gifts that all of us have, both the learning and faith community, and strengthen academic excellence. We want to make sure that we have quality interpersonal relationships between teachers and parents and teachers and students. And we want to ensure that the student is seen as a person whose integral growth is harmonized with spiritual, religious, emotional growth. And that's really important to us, that we are a community and that we're in communion as that community. We also really, the founding, one of the distinguishing characteristics is that we're accessible to all students. You know, it is because we have this evangelizing mission that Catholic schools should be available to all people who so desire a Catholic education for their children. The local bishops and those of us in leadership roles, we need to do everything in our power to manage available resources and seek innovative options to ensure Catholic school education is not just financially available, but geographically, programmatically, and physically, so that we can address all students who want to come to us and all families who want to avail their children to this education. And the ninth defining characteristic is established by the express authority of the bishop. Now, it could be easy to just say that you can't be a Catholic school unless the bishop says you are, but there's more to it than that, really. The bishops are pastors of souls, and they have a duty of making all possible arrangements so that the faithful may avail themselves of a Catholic education, and that is in canon law. And they need to put forward the mission of Catholic schools in their diocese, and this could be a conversation you might have to have in your diocese, I'm not sure. I'm fortunate in the Archdiocese of Portland that the Archbishop is very supportive of Catholic schools. So I know that I have his support. And we also want to work at establishing a relationship that's marked by mutual trust and that close cooperation. We want to make sure that we have a continuing dialogue with our bishop. And we also want to make sure that we understand and that we help the people in our pews and in our schools understand that we need to have a respect for this legitimate authority of Catholic schools. I just wanted to show you that there are several church documents that really support and that where those 9 defining characteristics came from. I'm not going to belabor those because we don't have enough time, but these documents went all the way up to 2006, which was one of the documents that one of the other sessions is using today by Archbishop Miller. But there have also been other documents since then put forth by the Congregation of Catholic Education, and the most recent one in October of 2020 by Pope Francis. He put out a video message and a statement on Global Compact on Education together to look beyond. And if you have time, you should look that up and read that. I think it's really inspiring and hopeful for us. And then what you need to know is that after we have those defining characteristics, they are foundational to the 4 domains. And you'll see that throughout the 4 domains, these pieces of those the defining characteristics are interwoven into them, but these are the meat of the piece that you would look at to be a framework to move your school forward. And so there's mission and Catholic identity. It has 4 standards and right now 21 benchmarks. There's governance and leadership, which has 2 standards and 13 benchmarks. Academic excellence has 3 standards and 18 benchmarks. And then operational vitality, which has 4 standards and 18 benchmarks. We're going to look quickly through some of these and maybe think about how you might use them. So first of all, you'll see in the NSBECS that each domain is defined. And so mission and Catholic identity, it draws a lot on those defining characteristics. The teaching mission should include inviting young people to a relationship with Jesus Christ or deepening them in an existing relationship that they may already have. We're also here to assist young people to see and understand the role of faith in their daily life and in larger society. The schools are here for the human person. They allow for schools' critical role in the future life of our church, our country, and our world. And these you can see are foundational in the documents as well. So then you look at that and you see that there are these 4 standards in mission and Catholic identity. So that first standard, an excellent Catholic school is guided and driven by a clearly communicated mission that embraces a Catholic identity rooted in gospel values, centered on the Eucharist, and committed to faith formation, academic excellence, and service. This would be an opportunity for you and your school with your leadership, or if you are leadership, to really kind of take the pulse of your school. Have we even looked at our mission lately? Do we reflect our mission? Is our mission central to all the decisions that we make moving ourselves forward? These are very practical questions because sometimes we lose sight of that. I think in the last year during the COVID pandemic, sometimes we kind of got caught up in the day to day and we might have forgotten about that mission. But I think what I tried to keep reminding our leadership is that even throughout this pandemic, every decision you make should be mission centered, and then you can't go wrong. You just go back to what is our mission. The second standard there, an excellent Catholic school adhering to mission provides a rigorous academic program for religious studies and catechesis in the Catholic faith, set within a total academic curriculum that integrates faith, culture, and life. So everything we do, from the religious studies to the other academic programs, it should all focus back on our faith and integrating that faith and the culture and the life together. There are several benchmarks that go along with this. That'd be great pieces for you to take a look at your school later. I know I'm talking a little bit fast, but I want to make sure I get to some of the pieces near the end where we look at a framework. Standard 3, an excellent Catholic school is going to provide opportunities outside the classrooms for student faith formation, participation in liturgical and communal prayer, and action in service of social justice. I think a lot of our schools do a great job with the service and social justice, but I think it's, again, a good reminder for us to see how we tie it back to our faith and how we tie that back to prayer along with that service and social justice, and not losing sight of the mission of why we are encouraging our students and our faculty and staff and families to participate in that social justice. And then standard 4, we're making sure that we provide opportunities for adult faith formation and action and service. And this is to make sure that we have some really good, solid programs for our faculty and staff on catechetical certification and ongoing training and faith formation, so they don't lose sight of who we are and what we're about. So I think it's important that we really truly focus in on that mission and Catholic identity and ask ourselves some questions. A little later, I'm going to show you some tools where you can actually have some questions to dialogue on with your faculty and staff to see where you are there. Okay, let's see here. Okay, and then the next domain is governance and leadership. Governance and leadership is really important. The success of the mission depends on key components of effective governance. Governance and leadership is a ministry that promotes and protects the responsibilities and rights of the school community. We want to make sure that we're based on principles and practices of excellent, essential, ensuring Catholic identity, academic excellence, and our operational vitality. We want to make sure that our governance and leaderships understand that they have an obligation to provide for an environment for teaching the doctrine and scripture, building an experience of community, and the opportunity for worship. Governance and leadership is really important to a school. I think what's interesting to me, just recently, there was a study done by Fatica, and in that it was a study on managing governance change, and they reviewed a lot of different governance models, but one of the key and most important factors, no matter what type of governance structure you have, is that you have competent and effective leadership in that role. So I think that's really important when we are choosing or trying to seek out new leaders for our schools, that we really do our homework and make sure that we have great mentorship programs for them if they're coming in, and help them understand their role. So there are 2 standards here. Standard 5, the school has a governing body which recognizes and respects the roles of the appropriate and legitimate authorities, exercises responsible decision-making, collaboration with the leadership team for development and oversight of the school's fidelity to mission, academic excellence, and operational vitality. I know there are different governance structures. Some have boards of limited jurisdiction, some have advisory boards, some have the pastor to work with, some have the archdiocese or diocese to work with. So no matter the type, we want to make sure that there are folks who are understanding what their role is. And also a Catholic school has to have a leader or leadership team that is empowered by the governing body to realize and implement the mission and the vision. And I think that's really important, that everything's always going to come back to that mission and vision and how we can enact that. And then the third domain is academic excellence. Again, we know that this is important. We want to have intellectual development of the person and growth as a Christian going forward hand in hand. The Catholic school brings faith, culture, and life together in harmony. We must provide an academically rigorous and doctrinally sound program of education to our students. Um, we also want to make sure that we have other curricular experiences, including co-curricular and extracurricular activities, and they need to be rigorous and relevant, and make sure that they're infused with Catholic faith and traditions. So really important that we're looking at the whole picture in this area as well. So there are 3 standards here. The Catholic school has a clearly articulated, rigorous curriculum aligned with relevant standards and 21st century skills and gospel values implemented throughout through effective instruction. And it's really important, the effective instruction piece, I think, especially now. We've had standards for quite a while, but we need to make sure that our teachers are well informed with up-to-date effective instructional models to help our students be successful. We also, in standard 8 there, the Catholic school uses school-wide assessment methods and practices to document student learning and program effectiveness, to make student performance transparent, and to form continuous review of curriculum and improving instructional practice. Again, assessment, I think we now know, it really is to understand how we are helping students grow and move forward. And if that means we need to change up our instructional practices, that's what we want to use that assessment for, to help us as teachers and instructors help our students to be successful. We also know that an excellent Catholic school is going to provide programs and services aligned with the mission to enrich that academic program and support the development of student and family life. I think this is ever so important, and we saw this in this last year during COVID. You know, a lot of students are experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of families are going through a lot of anxiety, and we need to make sure that we have those support programs that are in place, and they're not always academically based, but they are those extra programs that are going to support the learning that then will help the students be successful academically. And the 4th domain is operational vitality. You know, we spend a lot of time on, you know, academics and being rigorous in the faith, but we really know now, and I think that the NSBECS do an excellent job of really addressing operational vitality based on that mission and vision for us. We are in that constant socioeconomic challenges that are really hitting us at all angles, especially this past year. We need to make sure that we address that we have sustainable financial planning, that we address human resource and personnel management and professional formation. We need to address facilities maintenance and enhancement, institutional advancement, and communication. So we have a lot of pieces that we have to look at as leaders of our schools. We also need to adopt and maintain standards for operational vitality. As a diocese, we need to look at this. You know, I fortunately in the Archdiocese of Portland a few years ago, we did get to do some strategic planning for the entire diocese. It really was an opportunity for us to look at systems and put into place some standards of operational vitality and practice and how we could support schools. Now we've taken a little bit of a break in some of these areas because of COVID, but we are getting back on track with that. And I think it's really important. And it's going to be fundamental to ensure viability and sustainability for the future of our schools. You know, the operational vitality domain has 4 standards. Standard 10 is that you want to make sure that you have that feasible 3 to 5 year financial plan, and that's going to include both your current but also projected budgets. It's got to be a collaborative process, and it does have to have faithful stewardship. And I really think it's important to have that collaborative process. It can't just be the principal, it can't just be the president, and nor even just the finance council. All these different people have to work together, councils have to work together so that we're understanding, number one, what is the mission? What are we trying to get accomplished at our site? And how do we work together to do that and plan for the future? And then standard 11, we want to make sure that we have published resource and personnel policies, that we develop compliance with archdiocesan policies, or if you're a religious congregation schools, making sure that you're in compliance with that sponsorship. We know that it's going to affect everybody, but we want to have that clarity for responsibilities, expectations, and accountability. So as a diocese, these are policies that you can write together for your diocesan schools and make sure that everybody understands the meaning behind them and the purpose, that they are intentional so that we are successful. And then standard 12, oftentimes we have that deferred maintenance problem in some of our older schools, but we want to make sure that we develop a plan and that you get a committee together that can help you develop that plan. And so that you will maintain the facilities, the equipment, technology management, and have a plan for that to continuously support that implementation of educational mission of your school. I think we saw that especially this past year that we did have to really dive deep and make sure that our technology, our internet was up to date and that we could reach all of our students. And that's been important. And those schools who had these plans in place, they had a little easier go in making that quick transition. So it's helpful that we plan ahead for these pieces. And then that last standard 13, you want to make sure that you have a plan for institutional advancement, and you want to make sure that you have a compelling mission so that folks want to support you. And you're going to do this through communications, and you also want to have a plan for marketing, enrollment, management, development. All of these pieces important, and I think that it's great that we have these NSBECS, that we have all of these pieces right here in one spot that you can reach to when you're trying to make some plans to move yourselves forward. So I really am a proponent of strategic planning and accreditation. I think the two go hand in hand. I think the NSBECS are a great framework for both accreditation and for strategic planning. I think when we've looked at the data over the last several years, not just the last year with COVID, we started to see a decline in enrollment. All the more reason that we really have to be intentional about planning for the future. And the NSBECS with those defining characteristics infused throughout, I think are a great way for us to have that intentional plan moving forward. We did see this year, we saw a loss of schools, many schools across the United States. We are pretty fortunate where I am that we have not lost a school. We are working really hard to support a couple that are struggling a little bit, but I think that having some intentional plans and a way to reach out to others, I think when we have funders and people who want to support us, it's really important that we have a plan. They want to see that we have a plan in order to support us, and then they're more likely to support us. So I think it's really important, even when we're looking at our mission and our vision and everything should stem from that, we really have to take a second look at our operational vitality and make some real, sometimes tough decisions on how we are going to be vital into the future. And then that will help us to be viable into the future. And we just need to make sure that we are innovative as we make these decisions. You know, this has been a great opportunity, I think, and a hopeful opportunity this past year to take a look at the things that we had been always doing and saying, maybe we need to change a few things up. And that can inspire hope for the future for us, that we don't always do the same thing. And I really do think this is an opportunity. We want to make sure it's rooted in mission, but I think we can be very innovative and get people into our buildings. We ask ourselves those questions, who we are and who we want to be. And we also want to plan for our future leaders, because we need to be hopeful and hope filled. And we need to be innovative in order to attract some of these new leaders coming into our system to want to stay in the system and help move us forward. I think it's going to be really important. So just when you take that big picture look at strategic planning, I really think you could take out that the NSBECS, and again, I'm going to show you a couple tools, and really start with the defining characteristics. Say, you know, who are we? Do we really fit this mold of these defining characteristics at our school or in our diocese? How might we ask ourselves some of these questions to help us better serve our community, better serve our families? And you will have all these pieces right here in front of you. You are going to want to gather that data. You are going to want to use the surveys that the NSBECS have, and those are something that we will make sure that are published on the site. And you're going to want to gather together those focus groups. And then you want to make sure that you have some people who understand strategic planning, because you can't do everything yourself as the principal. to make sure that you can collate some of that information. You want to identify your areas of strength, and then you want to identify areas of growth before you create a plan. I am going to pull up the website in a second, but I want you to know that you yourself can look at the Catholic School Standards website, and they have some great tools on there. They have all of the standards written out, the defining characteristics. For each of the 13 standards, they have benchmarks, and then they've developed tools that will help you. So one of the tools that I'm going to show you is called Guidelines for Interpreting and Scoring Benchmarks. So it really is a tool you can take a look at yourself in any of those categories to ask yourself some specific questions that can lead you to some direct areas to help you better understand where you are and what are some goals you can set for yourself moving forward. So I am going to, before we end there, I am going to stop sharing this, and I want to share the website with you so that you can see it. And I think that I think it'd be important for you, for me to show you the website. And I will share this for you, because I think it's always important to see the website in person when somebody's talking to you about it. So this is the Catholic Standards website, the Catholic School Standards Project. And if you go to this website, you can click on these tabs. The Standards tab will show you all the defining characteristics and the domains that I just talked to you about. If you go to the assessment tools and you go to the benchmark guidelines, you will see these guidelines for interpreting and scoring benchmarks. And I think this is really important. This is a good way for you to take a look at each of the benchmarks and start asking yourself some questions about the benchmarks and guidelines. And I think also if you go in here, you are going to see some rubrics for those benchmarks. And they will, if you click on each of these, it tells you whether you fully meet a benchmark, whether you partially meet a benchmark, whether you exceed it. And if you dig down deeper and you dive into it even further, they actually give you some pieces that look like this, the guidelines for interpreting and scoring benchmarks. And it'll ask you some very good questions that you can talk to your team about. And I think when you start talking to your team, it will help give you a framework to help you understand where it is that you need to go to kind of improve in a specific area for you. Okay, hopefully that will help you with that piece. I want to make sure I get back here to my PowerPoint just to make sure okay. Gonna share. I really wanted to make sure I included this quote. Pope Francis in October of 2020, like I said, put together a video and then a written piece about Catholic education. And this is a quote from him. "We consider education to be one of the most effective ways of making our world and history more human. Education is above all a matter of love and responsibility handed down from one generation to another." And he says, "May we be sustained by the conviction that education bears within itself a seed of hope, the hope of peace and justice, the hope of beauty and goodness, the hope of social harmony." It's really important, I think, that you understand how much support we have from our local bishops, the Pope, our communities, everybody that we work with, I think wants to see us be able to work with students to help grow a more hopeful future. And I'm just motivated by, I like to show you my, I'm motivated by this. You know, these are 3 of my oldest grandkids. I have 13, several of them who are starting or who are either in Catholic school or who will be. And for me, they are the hope for our future, for our schools and for our world. Important for us to really be diligent, be intentional, really follow mission, look to our Catholic identity to make sure that we're serving our families, that we are hopeful, because if we are hopeful, then the people who support us will be hopeful in creating these dynamic and innovative schools for our children. I went through that quickly. I know that there's really a lot of professional development you could do on understanding the defining characteristics, the NSBECS. I'm fortunate to work with the Western Catholic Educational Association for accreditation, and we have a group of folks out in the California West Coast area who are working on some training and some professional development for the NSBECS that I think are going to be really helpful for our area. But I think in other parts of the country as well, we could work together and collaborate and understanding. And when we have a common understanding of who we are as Catholic schools, even though we want to be unique school to school, in general, we have a common mission. And that mission is foundational on Christ and on teaching our students to have a personal relationship with Christ, to be people for others, to be people for the world. Now, I don't think I've seen any questions yet coming through, but if you have any questions, okay, this would be a great time. You know, that's a good question. The question is, remaining true to our Catholic identity, how do you market to non-Catholics without watering down the school's Catholic identity? And I know I get that question a lot, and I really don't think we do have to water down who we are. I think I'm proud to be who we are. And I think if you are authentic with people and let them know what your program is about, and that we are founded on these defining characteristics, I think if you help people walk through those and they would understand what we are offering, I don't think you have to water that down to get people to want to come to your school. We have several folks in our schools. I mean, I think the little bit of the kind of the saying out here in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, is that we are one of the most unchurched parts of the world, and yet we still have thriving schools in our areas. So I don't think you have to water down the message. I think you can be proud that we are Catholic schools. So the NSBECS implementation of the diocesan level versus the school level. I think that that's a good question. There are two different things that we can do. And I think as at the archdiocesan level, for me, when we do our orientation for new principals and leadership and new teachers, I always start by explaining the defining characteristics of the NSBECS with them, because I think whether we use the NSBECS or not, the defining characteristics are very important because they help us to know and understand who we are and our rich history that we have and all the people that came before us who made it possible for us at this time. And then I do think that it moves a little further when you get to the school, because the schools, and I think it's my responsibility to help the principals know how to help their schools with these. And like I said, out here on the West Coast, we're starting to move towards using the NSBECS for accreditation. And I personally am starting to use them for strategic planning with my schools. So up to me to do the professional development with the leadership, so that then they know how to use it at the school site level in looking at their school, seeing where they are in the benchmarks, in the standards, and then how they can move themselves forward. So I think there's a place for both. Let's see, where do you think we should begin? SAC and strategic plan, or with the teachers? You know, that kind of depends on where you are as a school as well. Some of our schools have some excellent governance bodies. You know, out here we call it SAC, School Advisory Council. In other areas, they have school boards or boards of limited jurisdiction. But I do think you're right. I think your whatever your governance structure is, they need to understand what the NSBECS are. They might not need to understand them as much as you would as a school leader, but they need to understand what those defining characteristics are and why you're using those, why it's helpful to the school. I do think it's important that we use, for me, it's important that we use them, because for me, it's so right there in front of you. We have all these tools already defined for us. These are definitely the categories we want to look at when we are making a strategic plan. So for me, it's just easy to take those, what all these other folks have worked on. They've been around since 2012. We have a national committee sponsored by NCEA who's continuing to review and make sure that they're relevant and they're up to date. But I think it's important for us to all be on the same page, and it's a great place for us to do that. Teachers do need to understand them as well, though. So it is important that once the principal has a good understanding, that then you can move to the next step of helping teachers to understand. And right now, the national committee that we have, part of that committee has a research committee, and they are reviewing different dioceses to see where they are being used and how helpful they are. Also, on that website that I showed you, there is a tab there. You can look at what research has already been um, uh, done with the NSBECS, but I think it's only going to get to a point where we're using them more and more, and we can start to see how using those standards will help us to move ourselves forward. I think is an excellent way for us to work together. Yeah, so right now, moving struggling schools to meet the benchmarks. This is an interesting question, but I think it's important. And I think it has a lot to do with leadership of each school. I would say that currently I am working with a few schools to see, well, where are we as far as the leadership is, and then which piece in the domain seems to me the most area of need. And that is the way I look at it at first to help the schools. We have to take time to work individually with the leadership in those schools, with the faculty and staff at those schools to help them move forward. I think having the guidelines and the benchmarks give some concrete instructional pieces to the leadership at that school to help them say, well, here's a target. You know, this is an area that your school needs to grow, and here's a target that you want to reach, and here are some suggestions on how to get there. But I think it will take time for us, and it's going to be a lot of work depending on the size of your diocese with those schools that are struggling. And I think we all need to work together on the financial pieces as well. Fortunately, we had this conversation here in the Archdiocese of Portland to start a foundation outside of the schools, and it's slow going with the year of COVID, but I think we're going to get to a point where we have more funds coming in from larger donors or other corporations who can help support families in our schools, which could then free up some of the money in our schools so that they could be more innovative in their programming. Where do we begin with integrating aspects of accreditation? Well, that's a good question. And I think it's going to be important that in each diocese, you talk to the superintendent or those who are in charge of accreditation in your diocese. But I do think that the NSBECS, no matter what accreditation you are using, the NSBECS, the domains, really have specific questions that would fit right into whatever accrediting system you're using. For me, it seems like a simple marriage between the two, because I think of accreditation as ongoing out here on the West Coast, and I'm not sure where you're listening from, but every school goes through an accreditation. We don't do an accreditation at the diocesan level. Each school itself has to go through accreditation. So I think there is that opportunity for each school to then look at the questions, look at the standards, look at the rubrics, and then the questions and guidelines within each standard. And I think that helps move us forward. We are getting close to 9:50. And so maybe, let's see, one more question. Oh, there, that was the final question. Okay. Okay, great. So I appreciate all the comments and questions that you have, because it will help me improve what I'm doing to help my leadership here. And also, I think it will help me to help really refine our accreditation process, utilizing hopefully the NSBECS as we move forward. So thank you so very much for all of your time today. And I also want to thank Kevin Baxter for helping me with all the chat questions from NCEA. And also I would like to thank Jill Annabelle for helping me figure out how I was going to set this up in a live format. Thank you so very much. Have a very blessed Easter season. And thank you again for coming today, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you.